Close your eyes and think back to a simpler time. The early 2010s to be specific. Ray William Johnson is dominating YouTube. The Harlem Shake is being busted out across the globe, and while sat at your chunky family computer scrolling through Facebook, you read the spookiest, creepiest, cheapiest story you've ever read. It's got a monster, it's got a twist, it's either the best thing you've ever read or a confusing mess. Either way, you're scared, but you're also intrigued. Sintrigued, if you will. So what do? Run and hide under your covers? You're not a whittle baby. You copy and paste and share so that everyone you know can experience the same fear that you felt while reading this spooky tale. This is the desired effect of a creepypasta, or is it creepypasta? I'm just gonna say both. An urban legend or story that becomes popular by being shared around on the internet. These stories can span multiple genres of horror and even mediums, from blogs to games to YouTube videos. And because the internet is such a free-for-all, a successful creepypasta will go past the original creator and go on to become property of the people, where anyone can take the concept and do their own thing with it. And naturally, this breeds wildly varying takes on the same stories, with wildly varying levels of entertainment. But if what is and isn't a creepypasta is so vague, and there's so many of them, how do I approach this? How do I compare a minute-long video to an entire series of blog entries which take a couple hours to read? I mean, even the official website has probably thousands of them, so which ones do I even choose? Well, I think a fair way to score these is using two factors. How much did I personally enjoy going in and reading them or learning about them? And did the creepypasta achieve what it set out to do? Whether it be creating a new monster to speculate over, or in most cases, trying to write a compelling story. And as for which ones I'll be covering, well, I've asked around and done a few quick Google searches, and I think I've obtained a pretty nice creepypasta spread. Plus, if I get enough recommendations, I'll do a part 2. Also, yes, this video was supposed to come out at Halloween, but I guess now it's more of a Christmas special. So, happy holidays! First up, we have Sirenhead. Sirenhead is one of the more modern creepypastas, created in 2018 by horror artist Trevor Henderson. The monsters he creates often look like they shouldn't be able to stand up, or even exist in our world, but he makes them believable by seamlessly blending them into real-life street photography. And I think what made Sirenhead stand out from his large collection of monsters is how many interesting ways you can take his powers. So, Sirenhead has a siren for his head. I know, shock. But this isn't just for aesthetic purposes, it's how he gets into the mind of his victims. His real power is his voice. He can repurpose radio transmissions as well as conversations, as though he's tapping into the frequencies being sent about, using them against you, luring you in with the sweet familiar voice of another human. And by the time you're close enough to realize what's going on, it's too late. And don't even bother trying to scream for help, because Sirenhead will drown out this noise with his own. It's this psychological horror that makes Sirenhead so fascinating to me. And it's not like many other monsters where his powers are vague and you don't really understand them. It's just simple mimicry and any noise that he can use to his advantage.
You need to leave!
He's not all that overpowered. For example, when he's mimicking a human, it's said that there's a slight distortion, and even though it's subtle, it is something you can use to outsmart him, or at least get away with your life. But even aside from its powers, I think its appearance is really creative as well. This sort of blend of mechanical parts and flesh intertwined in a way where you're not sure where one begins and the other ends. My only gripe is its size. It's a very big boy, standing taller than most trees, and I think a more human-sized creature would make him more threatening, because at his current height, if he's luring you in with his sound, you'll see him long before you hear him and just turn around and gee it out of there. Imagine you're lost in the woods and you finally hear the voice of your friend, but when you reach the voice, you can't see anyone. And then, stepping out from behind a tree, is this being which almost looks like a tree itself, but small enough to hide behind one, blending in. And another thing I really like is how, because it has no voice of its own, just mimicry, it's not clear how aware it really is. Is it consciously choosing what audio to play to lure its victims in, almost for fun? Or is it just something that this species does on autopilot? You see, all of these questions are fun to speculate over, and that's what a great monster should do. So you know what? Get this man in A tier. Next up is the Ayuwoki.
So, Annie, are you okay? Are you okay, Annie?
What happened to her?
Also, just a heads up, my pronunciation of this is gonna flip-flop throughout the whole thing. Sorry. Now, the Ayuwoki is a tricky one, because it's kind of a joke. Even the name itself is a reference to the Michael Jackson song Smooth Criminal. Annie, are you okay? Are you okay? And despite having one of the best, goofiest backstories for a name, this is actually one of the creepiest pastas on this list. At least one version of it. The Ayuwoki originates from a video of a homemade Michael Jackson animatronic created by Thomas Rengsdorf. And this animatronic is horrifying. Where was he in Five Nights at Freddy's?
It's too late. He's coming.
You can tell that Thomas really knows what he's doing, even though editing is my favourite part of the video making process. When it comes to talking about a horror or a scary scene, I gotta be honest, it's kinda hard to do, because I have to stare at the screen and watch these clips at night in my room by myself. This is genuinely freaking me out right now. Get this man away. And it turns me into a little baby. And I think if we're talking in terms of pure looks, the Ayuwoki animatronic is the scariest. From the jolty stop-start way it moves, to its humanoid synthetic skin that looks like wax melting over a skeleton. I mean, talk about a striking image. So when it comes to the Ayuwoki animatronic, it goes up there in A. Some really great practical horror, but surprisingly, this isn't the most popular version of the creepypasta. When you type the name into Google, the first result that pops up is actually a game. A horror game to be specific.
Oh, what the fuck? What the? Why did I?
So I decided to give it a twirl and see what it was all about. If it can capture even a bit of the unease of the original, then we're in for a treat. I hate to say it, but we weren't in for a treat. Escape the Ayuwoki is pretty much just your average run-of-the-mill survival horror game. The goal is to complete 3 chapters, all while the Ayuwoki is chasing you down. And I gotta be honest, it got repetitive very quickly. You'll run a little and then hide under one of 100 replicas of the exact same desk. Run a little, hide under desk. Run a little, hide under desk. Over and over and over and over. And part of the problem is that when you're hiding under one of these desks, you're invincible. Nothing can touch you down here. And then as soon as you leave, it's fair game. It took a lot of the tension away because rather than creeping around, it's just a rush to get to the next desk. At times, he'll literally be looking right at you, but he just can't do anything. And it's not like he'll wait around so you have to time when you run, he'll almost immediately just walk away. And there is an argument to be made that it's not meant to be taken seriously, it's a game where you hide from a Michael Jackson animatronic. But the thing is, I often forgot that this was even supposed to be Michael Jackson, King of Pop. It doesn't really look anything like him. I mean, if I didn't tell you before showing you that this was supposed to be Michael Jackson, the gloved one, I think it'd be easy to assume he's just a vampire or something.
You're impossibly fast and strong. Your skin is pale white and ice cold. And sometimes you speak like you're from a different time. You don't go out in the sunlight. I know what you are.
Yes, I'm a gentleman.
The only time we're reminded it's him is when he rattles off a he. But that's his only sound, just hee after hee, and these hee-hees got 1 or 2 tee-hees out of me, but I could have done with a Shimona here and there. Or I don't know, some unique attacks or moves to really make it feel like, oh shit, I'm in Michael Jackson King of Pop's house right now. So the game takes about an hour to complete, at least one of the endings does, but in the last 5 to 10 minutes, it turns into this really grand story where you get dragged along a river of blood before being sucked into the void.
What is that?
And I gotta be honest, it felt really out of place. Like most people, if you're going into this because you like the Ayuwoki and you think it's scary or it's funny, you probably won't get what you want because he doesn't really resemble the character. But then if you're going into this because you want to see some godlike creatures, you also won't get what you want because this stuff is shoehorned in to the final couple minutes. If you're looking for a survival horror game to play with a friend that has a bit of humour, then this will probably do the job. But this genre is so oversaturated, you gotta be great to stand out. And I don't think this does. So sorry, Escape the Ayuwoki, you're coming in at D. Next up, we have the one and only Jeff the Killer.
Jeffrey!
Now, maybe it's because of 22 Jump Street, but I just can't see Jeff as a serial killer name.
My name is Jeff.
But maybe Jeff the Killer will be so scary that he can change my mind. Now, the original story was actually taken down from the Creepypasta wiki, supposedly for not meeting quality standards. Just so you know, there's like hundreds of creepypastas on this wiki, maybe even thousands, so that should give you some idea of what we're getting into here. It was moved instead to a site called Trollpasta. Honestly, this site looks like it hasn't been changed since it was created, and I kind of respect that. Although regardless of what anyone thinks of this story, it is ridiculous that it was taken down. I mean, people are clearly drawn to this story for one reason or another. The image is iconic, so just keep it up, let people make up their own minds. The whole point of creepypastas is that there is no bar of entry. Anyone can write one. After Backlash, it was put back onto the site, so I guess there's a happy ending here for fans of the story. Am I a fan of Jeff the Killer? Well, yes and no. I mean, it is a roller coaster. Let's get into it. Now, the funny thing about Jeff is that he's kind of just a guy with a knife.
He's got a knife!
Like a regular serial killer who just looks a bit funky. The Hookman of our generation, if you will. And I'll admit, in this image, he does look inhuman. If this guy was walking towards me with his smile all askew, I would run like Scooby-Doo in Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Bars.
That's our cutest canoe!
Now, the opening to this creepypasta was a little fast-paced, but I was still keeping up. It's an excerpt from a newspaper where someone who encountered Jeff the Killer and lived to tell the tale is, well, telling his tale. So he woke up in his room and realised that someone was staring at him. Okay, I'm following, I got you. And then it throws so much at you so quickly that's not even every few lines, but every few words, I had to stop, go whoa, 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 and then go back and reread it just to take it all in. It's like if you ask someone, how was your day? And they reply, well, I woke up, I got dressed, I took a dump, I left the house, I saw a cat, I went swimming, I got lost, I found Atlantis, I found myself, and then back home for a warm cup of rusty water. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little, but let me just read out this third paragraph and you'll see what I mean. He said, go to sleep. I let out a scream. That's what sent him at me. He pulled up a knife, aiming at my heart. He jumped on top of my bed. I fought him back. I kicked, I punched, I rolled around, trying to knock him off me. That's when my dad busted in. The man threw the knife. It went into my dad's shoulder. The man probably would have finished him off if one of the neighbors hadn't alerted the police. Like, whoa, slow down, buddy. I feel like I need to recreate this scene in video form just to show you how truly chaotic it is. He said, go to sleep. I let out a scream. That's what sent him at me. He pulled up a knife, aiming at my heart. He jumped on top of my bed. I fought him back. I kicked, I punched, I rolled around, trying to knock him off me. That's when my dad busted in. The man threw the knife. It went into my dad's shoulder. The man probably would have finished him off if one of the neighbors hadn't alerted the police.
And the Oscar goes to...
Papa Wave. After this newspaper article, we then learn the origin story of the one and only Jeff. Jeff is 13 years old and just moved into a fancy new neighborhood with his family. And the first thing you'll notice about Jeff is that it often feels like he needs to prove to everyone just how tough and cool he is. The first words out of his twisted mouth are, "Mom, why'd you have to invite us to some kid's birthday party? In case you haven't noticed, I'm not some dumb kid." And boy, does this statement age poorly, but more on that later. He's kind of in that phase that many of us go through in our teenage years, myself included, where he wants to seem edgy and cool, like he doesn't care about anything, but really he's highly emotional. Because even just having to go to their neighbor's party is enough to give Jeff some dark urges.
I'm a monster!
It's not long till Jeff and his brother run into the neighborhood bullies. And I'm not sure if these bullies are time travelers or something, because they're not just over the top by today's standards. These are the kind of bullies that your grandpa tussled with.
With a bit of argy-bargy.
The first line we hear out of their leader's mouth is, "Well, well, well, it looks like we got..." Kitty, I'm trying to record over here. "Well, well, well, it looks like we got some new meat." Right after, he skateboards over them like Cartman jumping homeless people in that one South Park episode.
Guys! That's 3 homeless!
The bullies tell Jeff and his brother that there's a bus tax, and they better pay up if they don't want to get cut, you see? Hey, that's our thing. Only British people are allowed to stab each other.
My mistake, original gangster.
And it seems that Jeff was wrong. He is dumb, because he walks right up to 3 knife-wielding bullies and just starts punching them. Don't do this, you probably will die. But Jeff ain't afraid. In fact, he's like a ninja. He takes out these 3 bullies with ease. A master of self-defense.
Your technique is impeccable.
And this is where it really started to feel like a self-insert. Like a teen's fantasy of what he's gonna do to his bullies if they keep messing with him. And that's probably why this story became as popular as it did. I assume Jeff was quite a big champion for people who were being bullied back in the day. I mean, the bully getting what's coming to them is a classic trope across not just horror, but all forms of media. I mean, it's basically the crutch of Darman's channel.
What am I talking about? You're obviously too poor to know that.
A few minutes later.
You know what? This is ridiculous.
People love poetic justice, but just the way that Jeff is described. He's always above it, he has no flaws. Don't get me wrong, you don't have to be entirely flawed, but at least have him take a couple hits. I think a good example of a character like this done well is Jack Reacher from the show Reacher. Jack in this show is an expert marksman, probably the smartest guy in the room at all times.
You're always so confident in your theories.
As confident as I am that you went to Harvard, you're recently divorced, and you quit smoking in the last 6 months.
How'd you come up with that?
And I have a slight suspicion that he might work out. Okay, fine, he's absolutely yoked. And when he comes up against a group of people, he usually wins.
You ever been to Bosnia? You ever been in this shit? Well, my dad was. And he left me this pocket.
But the difference between Jeff the Killer and Jack the Reacher is that one is ex-military, a fully grown man with godlike genetics, and the other is a 13-year-old boy. So yeah, if you're gonna write a character without any flaws, I think this guy's a bit more believable. But in fairness, Jack Reacher is a lot older. So okay, what about a young character? Well, a similar nonchalant tough guy is Wayne from the show Wayne, a YouTube original from back when they actually made those. A lot of people probably don't know this, but Cobra Kai actually started off as one of these before being acquired by Netflix. And to be honest, these two shows are probably the only good things to come out of that era, but still, I wish they carried on. Wayne begins with an altercation between him and 3 punks, and later on at school we learn that some of the pupils are scared of him.
Where's all my stuff?
Jesus, Wayne, you can't just walk in here like that. Now get out
Go
of here.
wait
I'll talk to you
outside.
later. Hey, Darren, stop. Sit down.
No disrespect, but that crazy fool will come to my house. You won't.
But the reason they're scared of him isn't because he's invincible, it's because, as we see from the opening scrap, when he does take hits, it doesn't really seem to affect him all that much, at least mentally. He breaks this man's window, gets wailed on, but then gets back up and breaks the other window, knowing that this man will probably beat him up all over again. He's a character who doesn't care about consequences, and that's what makes him threatening. But it's also a flaw. It's because he doesn't care about consequences that he's always getting into trouble.
Wayne, we just talked about this. Wayne!
And so he feels human. He has room to grow and evolve as he overcomes this flaw. But Jeff is more like a superhero whose origin story we don't get to see. So the next morning, police come to speak to Jeff. I mean, he's beat up 2 kids and stabbed another, so obviously they want to get to the bottom of it. Maybe bring him down to the station to get a statement, get some lawyers in, read him his rights.
Did you know that you have rights? The Constitution says you do, and so do I.
You know, due process and all that. But no, right away they think the pair are guilty. So they tell Jeff to call down his brother so they can arrest them both. And to stop his brother from getting in trouble, Jeff admits it was him. Which, by the way, is kind of treated as this noble act, like he's saving his brother. But Jeff was the only one involved. His brother just sat back and watched. So it's hard to root for Jeff when he's part of the reason his brother's even in this mess. And this is where we get my favourite line. After Jeff confesses, the police officers are just like, well, that's a year in juvie. No trial, no judge, just a year in the slammer by orders of unnamed Officer 2. The amount of power that police hold in the Jeff the Killer universe is honestly kinda scary. Now that I think about it, there are a surprising number of similarities between the stories of Jeff the Killer and Reacher. In the show, during a flashback, we see Reacher and his brother get stopped from going through a gate because there's a gate tax.
This the way to the beach?
Yeah. That's $5.
Sounds familiar. So him and his brother beat up the bullies, which results in the police arriving at their home because the bully lies and says that they attacked him.
Curtis Bishop had his face bashed in with this.
There were bicycle tracks leaving Curtis's house. You know where they led?
Joe, did you do this?
All signs indicate yes.
I hereby sentence you to 6 months at the Springfield Juvenile Correctional Facility.
Now take that kid away.
Could Jack Reacher really be Jeff the Killer all grown up after turning his life around? It's definitely possible, but that's for another video. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, Jeff the Killer. And then his brother comes down holding a knife and is all bruised up and he's like, no, take me instead, I did the beating up. And then I think the officers just got bored of the conversation because they're like, we'll take the brother. They're just going off these kids' words when they have conflicting stories and they're under the impression a pretty serious crime has gone down. Oh yeah, this is probably a good time to mention the mum in this story is a horrible wench of a woman. When her son is being taken away, she says to Jeff, don't lie Jeff, we know it was him. Like Jesus Christ, she just right away has no trouble believing her sons are violent psychopaths. Probably because she's the one who raised them. Honestly, I'd want to be taken to juvie too, to be honest, just to get away from this hag.
An old crone.
A couple days later, they go to their neighbour's party because they have their priorities fully in order. But uh-oh, the bullies come and crash this party to get their revenge. In the middle of the day, with probably dozens of witnesses, and I didn't even notice this the first time I read it, but it says that they skateboard over the fence. So either this is the shortest fence you've ever seen, or there's some Tony Hawk level of skateboarding going down right here.
Fuck off. He skates with 2 open knives in his pocket!
I kind of want to know more about this. This should be its own creepypasta. Now, this party goes from 0 to 100 so quickly. Two of the bullies whip out guns and sort of hold up this kid's birthday party, saying if anyone makes trouble, they're getting a bullet. See?
He's got a gun!
Boys, you are facing some serious years here. You can't kill or intimidate this many witnesses. The bully's leader, Randy, starts wailing on Jeff, but he manages to get the advantage and kill him. And if I was this bully, I'd be pretty annoyed that my friends have guns and yet they just let me be killed. These two remaining bullies chase Jeff upstairs while he's dodging bullets, and he manages to take them both out. But uh-oh, in the struggle, Jeff gets covered in bleach and alcohol, a thing of bleach, and in the last bully's dying breath, he whips out a lighter and sets Jeff on fire. So we as the reader already know that Jeff is covered in bleach and alcohol because they make a pretty big deal out of mentioning it, and at this moment the bully is holding a lighter. I think it's pretty easy to put 2 and 2 together, but the bully still has to say, well, you see, you're covered in bleach and alcohol, and that's why this is about to happen. I get it. After these wacky and crazy antics, Jeff wakes up in the hospital, his face wrapped in bandages, and when he finally gets a look at the damage,
That's a lot of damage!
instead of being horrified, he starts laughing. He's all like, yes, this is perfect. Now my face shows how evil I am on the inside. Mummy, mamacita. Yeah, he starts saying mummy and mummy a lot and daddy, and it gets kind of weird. Mommy. And this is the problem, I think. Is Jeff supposed to be some badass hero, man of the people, who sticks up for justice and only takes out bad guys? Or does he want him to be this sick, twisted guy who enjoys hurting people? He can't help hurting people. The kind of guy who will kill innocent people just sleeping in their bed. It just flip-flops from moment to moment with no consistency. And you might say, well, the burning and bullying is what made him this monster. It's about the corruption of a good kid. But that's not really true, because he talks throughout the story about this weird feeling he's been getting. At first, he's not sure what it is, but we later find out it's the urge to hurt people. But he gets this feeling before he even meets the bullies. He gets it when his mum tells him they have to go to a party. And it seems that the writer also realised that this was getting a bit confusing because they stopped telling the story to explain it to us. Remember earlier when he was snapping? Well, that's why this is happening. I get it. Jeff's family then take him home, and later that night, the mother walks in to him, how should I put this, making his smile permanent. You've seen the image, you know what I mean, which is kinda just the Joker origin story.
Now I see the funny side. Now I'm always smiling.
But not as good because it doesn't fit. You see, his reasoning for this is that he wants to always be smiling. And if this was a story about a kid who's told to always be happy who finally snaps, then maybe this would fit, but I just don't really see why this edgy guy who's quite pessimistic, who's been having this dark urge to hurt people, would feel the need to always be smiling. And I know he's going through a psychotic break, but it's still a very big leap. So if you're the mother in this situation and you walk in on your son, who very clearly needs some serious help, what do you do? A. Try and remove the knife. B. Call the police or an ambulance to come help, where they'll probably sentence him to 1 year in juvie. C. Try and talk him down. Or D. Run back to the father and tell him to get the gun because it's time to kill your son. That's right, it's D. This hag of a human being decides he's past the point of return. So Jeff walks in and kills his parents, and honestly, fair enough. But then he goes and kills his brother. The same brother he was protecting in the beginning. The same brother who went to juvie for him. So that didn't really make all that much sense to me. Now, it might sound like I hate this one, but I really don't. In a weird way, I think this might be the most memorable one I looked at. It's so cheesy and over the top, don't get me wrong, it barely makes any sense. But if I said there wasn't a big old smile on my confused face for a lot of this, I'd be lying. The only thing worse than a bad story is a boring story. So I don't think this one belongs in E, but I also don't think it'd be fair to put it higher than a D. This video is sponsored by me. Yeah, maybe subscribe if you wish, if you want to. It helps me out. Yeah, back to the video. Next up, we have the Expressionless. I hate to say it, but the Expressionless really isn't my cup of joe. It feels like someone looked at this creepy image of a medical doll and just made up a story on the spot in a couple minutes. It's so random, and not in a fun way like Jeff the Killer, more in a I'm struggling to think of what to write next sort of way. So what is the Expressionless? Well, it's an image of a woman in a hospital bed, accompanied by a short text explaining the backstory of said image. Now, I will admit, her appearance is kinda creepy. From what I've gathered, it's actually a photo of a wax dummy that student nurses would use for training, taken by photographer Lord Snowden. Not the one from Game of Thrones, the one from real life. And I think we can all agree that dolls are naturally scary, because they're limp and lifeless, but made to look lifelike.
I love my family and they like me!
With realistic hair and eyes that aren't really looking anywhere, just sort of glazed over, so they always sit uncomfortably in that uncanny valley. But a creepy monster means nothing if the story surrounding it doesn't hold up, and maybe if the Expressionless was just this image, I would rank it a little bit higher. But the problem comes with the attached story. So this doll woman runs into a hospital with a kitten in her mouth, passes out, gets restrained, and when she wakes up, she writhes around and opens her mouth, revealing hundreds of needle-like teeth. Horrified, the doctor asks, "What are you?" To which she replies, "I am God," before killing everyone and running away. Except for one nurse, which she leaves alive, so that she can tell the tale and carry on the legend, of course. And it might sound like I'm simplifying things, but if you read it, you'll realise that there's really not much more to it. And it's not as though I don't enjoy short stories. There are plenty of shorts which do a great job of creating tension in the little time they have. But for me, this just wasn't one of them. And when she busted out that I am God, it just seems like an attempt to add some deeper meaning to an otherwise pretty standard story, as if to say, my monster is scarier than most monsters because she might be a god. But for me, it's always scarier when something hints at being godlike, or does something that makes you think, how powerful really is this thing, rather than just blurting it out. Why are you trying to prove it with your words and not your actions?
Any man who must say, "I am the king," is no true king.
To me, this line is on the same level as, "and it was all a dream." If you enjoyed this one, fair enough, but it just wasn't for me. Sorry Expressionless, you gotta go in E. I'm with you, Mahmood Sleeps, not scared o' her. Up next is the infamous Slenderman.
Fear the man, the Slenderman.
Now, Slenderman is probably the most famous creepypasta. You know who he is, I know who he is, hell, your grandma probably knows who he is.
How many pages do we have to find?
8, and we only have 1.
He was so impactful in the early 2010s that he's probably the only one to get a mainstream movie adaptation.
Hi, sisters.
When it comes to Slenderman's appearance, like most creepypastas, it varies a lot depending on the source. However, most versions describe a lanky fella with no facial features and pale white skin, and some show him levitating with tentacles sticking out of his back. But to me, the most effective versions are the more toned down ones, where he's close to human, but not quite, because from a distance he could just be a strange looking man, but as he gets closer, his abnormal body proportions and facial features, or lack of, begin to reveal themselves. But my favourite part of the whole Slenderman lore is actually what started it all. These images which talented Photoshop artists have created depicting him, the first of which was created by Eric Knudsen. And as the creator of Slenderman, I think he understood that keeping these photos sort of blurry and in black and white makes them more scary in a way, actually, because you don't even notice that Slenderman's in them a lot of the time, unless you're actively looking for him. He's not the focus or the subject of the image, up front and in the center. He just happens to be in them. And it feels like you're an investigative journalist looking through images where this strange being just happens to be in the back of them. Since these original images, the most common depictions show him stalking people through the woods. And again, I like how most of these photos show restraint. In some of them, I really had to look for where he is, and I questioned sometimes if I'd accidentally stumbled off the Slenderman wiki and was just looking at nature photography.
Hidden in the vegetation of the moist forest floor is a richly populated underworld.
And it's not just photos, there's also cave paintings and drawings from long ago. And the fact that these depictions span so many periods of history make the god angle much more interesting, because we're the ones to piece it together. It's not spelled out for us word for word, and it still leaves room for doubt and speculation. The depictions are vague enough to where there's a chance that these similarities are just coincidences, or maybe it really is a timeless god. It's a lot more effective than if he just blurted out, "I am God," while stalking you. So yeah, I like Slenderman. He can go up here in B. Actually no, he can go in A. I really don't have many problems with him, at least if we're talking about these photos. If there's a good Slenderman story that you think I should read, let me know. It's time for Mereana, Mordegard, Glesgorv. Whew, what a mouthful. MMG is a video found on YouTube, or should I say was a video on YouTube, because legend has it that shortly after being uploaded, everyone who watched it was driven mad to the point where they did a big ouchie on themselves before sending in the result of this damage to YouTube HQ.
Oh, what's in the box?
God, we're really stretching the monetization friendly terms here. At which point, the higher ups scrubbed it from the platform, making this one sort of a lost media case, which does help with the believability because, well, you can't prove this video never existed because they took it down. It's kind of like a mix between The Ring and Bloody Mary.
Have you heard about this videotape that kills you when you watch it? You start to play it, and it's like somebody's nightmare.
Don't do this certain thing or someone will come for you, but rebels will frickin' do it anyway. A test of our morbid curiosity, because what do you really get if you find it? At best, disappointed by a weird video, and at worst, a horrible fate of self-ouchies. So what horrors could possibly be in this video for people to go so mad over it? Well, it's just a guy staring at the camera. It's red, it's shaking, it's grainy, and I guess it was slightly off-putting. It did hurt my eyes a little towards the end, but unfortunately, I didn't go insane. Then again, it wasn't the original video, so who knows? And even though I like this concept of a hidden video which drives you mad, in execution, the video itself just isn't very interesting or creative. It takes about 30 seconds in an editing software to make any image look like this. Here, I'll do it now. Get that contrast up, color grading all the way to red, put on the projector, and there you have it, Mereana, Mordegard, Glesgorv 2. It just would have been nice to get some more creative imagery in here. Maybe even just another 2 or 3 shots to cycle through, because as it is, it got kinda boring halfway through, and again, it's only a 2-minute video. I'm not even sure if the guy in this photo was the one to create this legend, although for his sake, I really hope he was, because imagine he's just walking around out there, and people are running away in fear, and he has no idea why. He thinks he's this hideous monster. And I will say, what works about the Bloody Mary legend, or Biggie Smalls if you're cultured,
Biggie Smalls, Biggie Smalls, Biggie Smalls,
is what works here. With the classic legend, you have to say the name into a mirror 3 times. And you know, the first are easy, kind of a joke even. Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary. But it's that tension between the second and third that makes you go, I know this is probably a goofy little legend, and people do this all the time, but what if this time it does happen? And it's the same here with MMG, but instead of counting down from 3, the seconds are counting down for you as the video approaches the end. The problem, I guess, is that the only way to get a taste of what this video is like is to watch the brief re-uploads, some of which probably have Subway Surfers on them. I just wish it was a little harder to find any video footage. I don't know, maybe if it had its own website, or you had to really track it down, and there's all these warnings, you know, make it feel like something that people have tried to hide for your own good. So yeah, despite being an adequate reimagining of the classic urban legend and a fairly cool concept, I was left wanting a little bit more from the actual video. Sorry MMG, you're going in D. Next up is Penpal.
Don't call me. Don't come by my house.
Now, Penpal was originally 6 short stories, but was later published as a complete book, and out of all the creepypastas I looked at, this one feels like it deserves it the most. I do still think the best way to consume it is on the original Reddit thread, because it's written as a blog, but it's nice to have both, plus you get to support the author. So what's it all about? Well, Penpal is about a man who starts recollecting strange events from his childhood, realizing that he was the target of a stalker, this presence which has been lurking in the shadows, terrorizing him since he was just 6 years old, puppeteering so many significant moments in his life, even if he was too young to realize it at the time. Now, like I said, this creepypasta is pretty long. It'll take you the better part of an hour to read, and I think this is quite a risky move if you want to get your creepypasta out there, because you want people to share it about, and if it's too long, they might go, yeah, I ain't reading all that. But a longer story allows you more room to build tension, and I think that's the hardest part about writing short stories like these, having to walk that line of being digestible whilst also getting you invested. And I think Penpal strikes this balance quite nicely, because each of these 6 parts is pretty entertaining in their own right. I mean, some are definitely better than others, but I think most of these work pretty well on their own. I would have walked away satisfied after just reading the first part, because it has a nice little satisfying twist in there, but then it sets up more questions which the author then goes on to answer and build on in the following parts. And together, they become something stronger than their individual pieces, intertwining in a really creative way. The first memory begins with the narrator, who remains unnamed, so I'll be calling him the Kid, waking up in the middle of the woods at night, with no idea how he got there, or even where there is. If you go in blind like I did, and you're unaware that the stalker is the villain of this story, you're kind of in his shoes, where you're wondering if he slept walk, or if he was taken out here by someone who wants him away from society. He mentions hearing footsteps, but again, maybe that was his own. From the very first moment, it sets up how powerless he is in his own story. I know I say this a lot, but I love when a horror story integrates sleep and it's done well, because it's when we're at our most vulnerable. And in a story like this, where the villain is a stalker, what better way to introduce him than to not introduce him? He set the events we're reading into motion before the story even began. And despite starting on this pretty creepy moment, it doesn't stop here. His way back home is pretty intense, because if someone took him out here, it's only logical that they're probably still nearby. And for me, the most tense part was actually when he made it to his front drive, or lawn for the Americans. It reminded me of that scene in Insidious where the son is trapped in this sort of limbo ghost world, and the dad has to go in and bring him back to his body. And the scary part isn't really when he's on his way to his son, it's the home stretch when they're running from these demons, and I'm just yelling at the screen, "Go! Go, run!" And then, just as he's about to walk in the door, he's grabbed from behind. So I was like, oh no, it's all over. This is where some ghost comes in, or the boogeyman takes him to his lair. But no, it turns out to just be a police officer. Again, this stalker won't show his face that easily. And you could argue, what a fake out. But the story sacrifices what could be a scary moment, the kid being grabbed, and uses it to create a feeling of safety, so we let our guard down, because the real scare of this story is what the mother tells us next. The reason she called the police is because she found a runaway note on the kid's pillow, but when the kid reads it, he says his name is spelt wrong. And boy, I'd be lying if I said that that didn't spook me a little bit, because it means that whoever wrote this note was in his room, had access to him, brought him to the woods. Whatever they wanted, they could have had it. But he's still here. He's back home safe, as though the stalker isn't even worried about it. They know they'll have another chance. But we haven't seen him yet, so a small skeptical part of me thought, well, maybe in his dreamlike state, he spelt his name wrong.
Well, you signed it in your blood.
Oh, yeah, there it is, Trundle, written in blood.
Oh, yeah, I was going by Trundle at the time, wasn't I?
No, you were trying to write Charlie, and you wrote Trundle.
No.
After all, he is only 6, and that is a big issue with this story. The way he talks is really not like a 6-year-old. I mean, he uses the stars to navigate his way home, not to mention he's remembering all of this from the present. So the fact he remembers it so well, despite being so young at the time, does take a little bit of the believability away, but not enough to ruin it for me. I just think it would have been an easy fix to age him up a few years.
Another 100 years?
But yeah, the ending to this first part is pretty great setup for what's to come, but still has enough of a payoff to where he could have stopped here, but I'm glad he didn't. So each chapter shows the stalker taking something important to a child's life and corrupting it, making it feel unsafe, whether it be sleep like in the first part, or a family pet, a first date, a best friend, and in the second chapter it's school, more specifically a fun school assignment called the Balloon Project, where they tie letters to balloons and send them off in hopes that wherever they land, they'll find a new pen pal. Oh my god, that's the name of the pasta. A pretty cool idea that would probably not be done today, for the reason shown in this story. Whoever gets the kid's balloon and letter starts sending seemingly random blurry Polaroids into the school for him to have. These Polaroids don't really show anything significant, and there's no return address, so the kid almost forgets about them, until one day he takes a closer look and discovers that he is in one of the photos, walking with his mother, and then he takes a closer look at the others and discovers that he's in every single one. The answer has been right there in front of him, he just didn't realise it at the time, much like how he's retroactively putting it all together from the present. And I like how it's always this one-way connection between him and the stalker. This person can get to him whenever they want. They know his home, his school, but us and the kid know nothing about him. At this point, we don't even know if this is the same person from the first part. But now, I'm fully in and want to know what happens throughout the other parts. Who is this damn stalker? Also, for once, a parent in a horror story isn't completely oblivious. The kid's mum actually calls the police when she thinks her son is in danger.
Go to the police, you stupid woman! Why does nobody ever just go to the police?
And then the third part was even better, probably my favourite out of all the chapters, called Boxes. After moving to a new neighbourhood, the kid becomes devastated when his kitty, Boxes, suddenly goes missing, leading him to think that maybe it got lost and found its way back to their old home, as he remembers it used to always get stuck in the crawl space. So that night, he hatches a plan to sneak out and go check for himself. When writing horror, one of the make or break elements for me personally is the character motivation. How many times have we seen characters purposefully put themselves in dangerous situations for seemingly no reason? It's so frustrating. But here, it's a noble cause and completely understandable. People will go to extreme lengths if they think their pet is in danger. He's not returning for fun, he's trying to save his kitty.
Shh, little kitty had to be twat. or else they're gonna find you.
And this chapter builds up what is arguably the heart of this story, the friendship between the kid and his childhood best friend, Josh. So Josh agrees to come with the kid because his old home is pretty far away. And this simple act immediately made him likable because he's the kind of person who will risk getting in trouble if it means helping his friend. And this part where the kid is searching the crawl space for his cat is just some great stuff. So the two split up, the kid in the crawl space and Josh just above searching inside the home. So they're still pretty close to one another, they're not completely isolated, but they can't see each other, only communicate through walkie-talkies. Again, when searching for a monster that can pick you off easier one by one, splitting up and looking for clues is probably a dumb idea.
Well, I guess we better split up and look around.
But they have no reason to assume that anything strange or sinister is happening here. They're in his old suburban home. And this part did a pretty good job of subverting my expectations, because the kid is in this really claustrophobic crawl space, somewhere often used to hide dead bodies. You know, just a classic horror movie location. I thought, well, this stalker's obviously gonna be down here lurking about, and this kid is gonna have to scramble to get away from him, crawling towards the exit. It's gonna be intense, but I know what's gonna happen. But no, there are remnants of someone being down here. Food, animal carcasses, too many to just be accidental. But the real danger comes from above. Josh is the one to run into this stalker, the seemingly safer of these two options, and the kid is actually trapped down here. Josh put the cover to the entrance back on after the kid entered, in case the cat ran back out while he was exploring. So all the kid can do is lie there, helpless, listening to the footsteps above and his friend's scared whispers. And again, it means that we still don't get a first-hand description of the stalker, because before the kid sees him, the pair manage to escape. But Josh drops his walkie in the process. And the next night, when the kid is back home, he hears his cat meowing. So at first, I was frustrated that they put themselves in danger for no reason, but at the same time relieved that the kitty was okay. But then he realizes this meowing is coming from the remaining walkie-talkie. Whoever has it has his cat, and it never comes home. It's such a rush of conflicting emotions in just a single paragraph. And then we get a time jump, and this friendship, which we've seen build up over the last few chapters, isn't really a thing anymore. The pair grew apart after the night in the crawl space, and so in an attempt to reignite their friendship, the kid invites Josh to his birthday party. But Josh doesn't seem like himself, he seems down and tired, and that's when he reveals he's been sleepwalking. Because we've been following this story through the kid's eyes, and we entered it with him, it's easy to think that he is the sole victim of this stalker. So when this burden gets passed on to Josh, I really wasn't expecting it, even though logically it makes sense. There's a good chance returning to Josh's house that night brought the stalker to his doorstep. And since by this point the kid had moved neighborhoods, the stalker probably couldn't find him anymore, so he shifted his focus onto Josh instead. And because all of this is being written in the present, we kind of already know that the kid is going to make it out alive. The only one we don't know about is Josh. How come we haven't heard his opinion on any of this? And after another time jump, we learn the pair haven't spoken in years, and the kid finds out that Josh's family is under the impression that he ran away. Of course, we know that the stalker actually wrote this note, but maybe this time he spelt the name right. It's really tragic because all the time the kid was dealing with this stalker, he always had Josh there as a friend. If he went to find boxes by himself, he would have likely walked right into the stalker's hands. But now that the two don't see each other, they're vulnerable, and Josh has no one there there to help him. He is the true victim of this story, because Josh doesn't make it out. He's found buried alive in the same box as the stalker, dressed in the kid's clothes, to help fulfill some sort of fantasy where the two will be bound together by death. And the worst part is that Josh actually manages to bite and kill the stalker, but the man is so huge that Josh couldn't push him off him, and so he just lay in there, waiting to die. And I love how this stalker isn't some hideous monster. Well, on the outside, he's just a normal looking guy, which is so much creepier because he could be anyone really. He could walk past you in the street and you wouldn't look twice. So many creepypastas end with, and they're still out there somewhere. They could be under your bed.
Like there's a ghost right behind me, isn't there?
So I like how this one had the balls to actually kill off the antagonist and refrained from going too much into detail about his appearance. When we finally do get a brief description in this final chapter, he's already dead. There's no fight or chase scene, we never even see a conversation with him. He is always in control, always 2 steps ahead. He never lets things get to the point where we get answers from him, because even his death is calculated. And it brings up some interesting questions about Survivor's Guild, because in a way, it was meant to have been the kid in the coffin, and had he just reached out to his friend, he might still be here. And the story ends with him apologizing. And then it went a little bit too sentimental with the speech, but overall, just a really great series of shorts that improve and build on each other very successfully. This one, without a doubt, is coming in at S. Oh yeah, I've put links to all the creepypastas in the description, and also the link for this book if you want to support the author. Next up is the Russian Sleep Experiment.
I need some sleep.
The Russian Sleep Experiment is a story delving into the true horrors of humanity, the things we do to each other in the name of research. So what is this research? Well, 5 test subjects are sealed in a room and forced to inhale a toxic gas, a gas which prevents them from falling asleep. And throughout the story, we see their gradual descent into madness. Now this is a really great concept for a creepypasta because you can do so many interesting things with it. Pretty much everyone on the planet has been sleep deprived at some point, whether it's a late night cramming for a test or you've chugged one too many Monster Energy drinks. Everyone has a relationship with sleep, so you already have some sense of relatability in this story. And I think where the Russian Sleep Experiment shines is when it focuses on the human element, how it's people who are doing this to other people. You see, these 5 test subjects are political prisoners, and so it's not unbelievable that they would be forced into this experiment, because when people are in conflict, they can stop seeing each other as people and instead an obstacle, or in this case, a resource. And these kind of experiments, pushing people to their limits, aren't entirely fictional. I recommend going and looking into Unit 731 after this video, although be warned, it's not for the faint of heart, or even the studies on sleep deprivation carried out by Marie de Menacillon, although again, be warned, she used dogs in her experiment, so research at your own risk. And while at first, the reasoning for the experiment not being given frustrated me, on my second read, I actually quite like how they left this vague, because it's interesting to speculate over the reason, or if there even is a reason. If I had to take a guess, I'd say that the reason they want to find a way to keep people awake for as long as possible is so that they can make workers who never need to put down their tools, or soldiers who never need to put down their weapon, turning humans into efficient machines with no downtime. I think what would have bumped this one up to the top tiers for me personally is if it simply shifted the perspective it's told from. It's explained in a sort of summary from a third party, almost like how I'm explaining the events now, but I'd love to see a version of this story told from a logbook, like a collection of entries from either one of the subjects or one of the scientists, reporting on the experiment as the effects of sleep deprivation gradually worsen, just to get a little taste of the mindset of those involved, the guilt of the scientists and the fear and suffering of the subjects subjects would be a really interesting thing to explore, because probably the worst part about sleep deprivation is the paranoia. And if you're locked in a room with 4 other paranoid people, in a situation and a period of history where you have every reason to be paranoid, then I think it would have been fascinating to see this be touched on. The story ends with this almost satanical monologue from one of the test subjects about the darkness within us all and how they're always there, hiding under our beds, and I feel like it didn't really need this. The story was interesting enough as just an examination of human nature and our relationship with sleep, the mind games and torment that these men are being put through, like how they're promised their freedom if they survive 30 days, when really this was never gonna happen and they'd be dead by this point anyway. The scientists are giving them false hope because then they'll be easier to control, or like how halfway through, the gas that keeps them awake is switched off. The source of their pain is now gone, but by this point they've altered themselves, shall we say, in monetization friendly terms. And so instead of going back to normal and asking to be freed, they beg for the gas to be switched back on. Probably because the mental and physical damage of what they've been through has pushed them past the breaking point. Yes, they can sleep now, but if they do, when they wake up, they'll be forced to face what they've done to themselves and to each other. And so it's easier for them to stay in this mad state. This kind of stuff is way more fascinating to me than the idea that there's some deep inherent evil lurking within us, waiting to come out. And that's why, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the ending, the psychological horror found throughout the Russian sleep experiment made it a pretty enjoyable read. So I think I'm happy putting this one in B. Very solid creepypasta. Okay, I think I got time for one more, so Herobrine. Is it Herobrine? Herobrine? I always called him Herobrine. Now, this is one of the few creepypastas that I actually remember being invested in myself way back when Minecraft had just come out on the Xbox 360. So, Herobrine is an urban legend that exists within the Minecraft lore. Not the actual lore of the game, but the fanbase. The idea is that within the game, there is this evil hidden figure, only ever appearing for a brief second before disappearing. You gotta be real quick and real lucky if you want to see Herobrine. I do find it interesting how wherever there's a large unexplored area, like the woods or a jungle or a desert, legends of monsters lurking in them will always appear, and how that same idea then translated to this video game. Because Minecraft worlds are really just a whole bunch of wilderness to go explore, and so it's only natural that a legend of a rare evil mob would pop up. Now, Minecraft's art style is so simple that it's hard to really make anything look scary when using it. You know, it's not really a horror game, so I guess slapping white eyes on the default skin is about as creepy as you can get. But the purpose of Herobrine isn't really to be a scary looking character, it's to set up this sort of mystery. Is Herobrine real or not? And you can sort of go down the rabbit hole and watch the videos with the massive arrows and circles circling the only thing in the thumbnail. And even though I think I'm quite a skeptical person, I actually did believe I saw Herobrine back in the day. At this time, Minecraft was really simple, especially on the Xbox, and there were very few mobs. So when playing solo, it really did feel like you were alone in this world. I think that's what made Herobrine a product of its time. Back then, you discovered everything to do pretty quickly, and so having this mob out there, which you could never actually find, helped to keep some of the mystery alive, and always gave you something to look out for while exploring. But this means, as the game has evolved and the world has been filled with more creatures and mobs, becoming more lived in with communities of villages and structures popping up all over the place, the world doesn't feel as isolated anymore, and now there actually are mobs that stalk you from a distance.
Alright, there it is. What the fuck is that? What the fuck is this?
and so the Herobrine legend became less effective because the things that made it work were changing. Now, like many creepypastas, over the years, many different theories on Herobrine's identity have been formed, but from what I can gather, the original comes from this post, claiming that Herobrine is really the dead brother of the game's creator, Notch. Like, his spirit went into his character in the game, and now he spends his days haunting this cube world. Which I find pretty funny, because Notch doesn't even have a brother to be dead. I would have loved to have been in the room when he found out about this. Beep boop 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 boop. Notch, is that you? You're not gonna believe this, pal. You've got a brother. No, I'm serious. You've got a brother. He's been waiting for you all this time. He can't wait to meet you. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, go on YouTube. One sec. Type in top 5 real Herobrine sightings in Minecraft. And then in brackets, scariest Herobrine Minecraft sightings. Yep, that's it. Yep, the one with the circle and arrow. Are you sure? I think it's pronounced Herobrine. Hello? What's stopping me from putting this one higher up in the list is that if you haven't played Minecraft, it probably won't make much sense. And I think creepypastas work best when they're self-contained. But I think early on it really did make Minecraft more fun to play, and so I'll put it middle of the road, a nice cozy C. Ah, well, here we have it. The creepypasta tier list. I think there's like 9 on here, so I'm definitely gonna have to make a part 2. But I want to get this video out for Christmas. Plus, it's getting long enough. I think we're like 50 minutes at this point. So let me know in the comments which ones you want to see covered next time. Overall, I was quite impressed with some of these. And the fact they're just out there for free is pretty great. Anyone across the planet, as long as they have an internet connection, can access these. And it makes me wonder how many young writers these stories have inspired over the years. Yeah, thank you for all the support in 2023. Here's to another one. I know I've yapped for long enough. Thank you, I love you, goodbye. Beep boop 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 boop. You alright, mate? Yeah, we're gonna go hunt down Herobrine. No, I'm pretty sure it's Herobrine, mate. What do you mean? We'll break up with her. We'll leave them. They're old enough to look after themselves, mate. They'll find a new dad. Come on, we're hunting Herobrine. Alright, be online in 5. Hello?